Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The O'Keefe mansion stood like a monument of success in the heart of Victoria Island, Lagos. Grand marble columns, imported chandeliers, automated gates, and walls covered in imported vines. From the outside, it was a perfect palace, a billionaire's fortress guarded by wealth and status. But inside, the cracks were wide, deep, and loud. That morning, the house was in chaos again. Screams echoed down the hallway as Nanny Kate stumbled out of Jason's room, her eyes red and her dress soaked in paint. Junior stood proudly by the stairway railing, holding the emptied can like a trophy. "This is war," she shouted, stomping toward the main entrance. "I am done with this devil's den." The staff barely flinched. They had seen it before, 12 nannies in the last year, each one leaving more traumatized than the last. The boys had chased them out one by one with pranks, emotional games, and weaponized grief. They were legends in disobedience, smart, cold, unpredictable. And today, Nanny Kate had become just another casualty. Angela, the fiancée of Chief Darlington O'Keefe, arrived in high heels and tension, her designer dress clinging to her curves like armor. "Again," she hissed when she heard what happened. She marched into the lounge where the boys lounged in front of the TV, feet up, popcorn scattered like confetti. "What did I tell you about embarrassing this household?" she snapped. Jason didn't blink. "She called us demons. So we gave her a reason." Junior giggled. Angela's mouth tightened into a furious line. She raised her hand but caught herself, not out of kindness, but fear of being recorded again. "I will deal with both of you when your father gets back," she warned. But the boys knew better. Their father, Chief Darlington, was too busy building empires to notice what happened within his walls. The boys were shadows in his mansion, spoiled and forgotten. And Angela? They knew she didn't love them. She loved the lifestyle. Everything about her screamed temporary. By sunset, Nanny Kate had packed her things and fled the premises without looking back. The mansion was quiet again, not peaceful, just waiting. Darlington returned that night from a business trip, visibly irritated when informed of the latest nanny exit. "Get someone else. And fast," he said, loosening his tie without emotion. "These boys will not ruin my reputation." Angela tried to convince him to send them to boarding school, but he refused. "My sons are O'Keefe heirs. They stay in my house." But the truth was, Darlington didn't know his sons anymore. Jason, once a gentle artist, now barely looked him in the eye. Junior, who used to dance to his mother's cooking songs, now sneered at authority. And neither of them mentioned their late mother anymore, as if saying her name would burn them. The O'Keefe mansion didn't need another nanny. It needed a miracle. And unbeknownst to them all, that miracle had already arrived, quietly, humbly, broom in hand, mopping the hallway floors and watching everything unfold. By the next morning, the house manager had called in a new candidate, Miss Edna, a sharp-tongued woman in her late 20s with a diploma in child psychology and zero tolerance for nonsense. She came in wearing a pencil skirt and glasses, radiating confidence and quoting textbooks. Angela, eager to regain control of the household, approved her instantly. "Discipline. That's what these boys need," Angela declared as she sipped her mango smoothie. Darlington didn't even look up from his emails. "Let's see if she lasts the weekend," he muttered. Miss Edna gathered the boys in the study for a respect and structure meeting. Jason smirked. Junior yawned. Before the hour was up, Jason had poured vinegar into her green tea, and Junior had swapped her psychology journal with a notebook full of his mother's old insults. She had written them down, every time Angela screamed or threatened them. When Miss Edna read the notes, she went pale. "You boys are deeply disturbed," she muttered. Jason tilted his head. "You're just deeply slow." On the second day, she tried to implement a strict study schedule. The boys responded by hiring a trumpet player with their allowance to stand outside her room at 5 a.m. and play off-key for 30 minutes straight. When she confiscated their phones, they hotwired her car and moved it to a nearby street. Miss Edna was furious, but the house staff only shrugged. The boys had done worse. Once, Junior replaced the chef's salt with sugar for an entire week. Another time, Jason accidentally sent a shirtless picture of a nanny to his father's business partners, nearly sparking a lawsuit. Miss Edna called for a family meeting. Angela refused. Darlington didn't show. Only Amarachi, the quiet maid, showed up with juice and quietly apologized on behalf of the boys. "Don't apologize for them," Miss Edna snapped. "They are spoiled brats. And this house? Rotten from the core." That night, she packed her bags and left, the 15th nanny in 2 years, to walk out defeated. As Miss Edna's car disappeared into the early morning traffic, Amarachi stood by the balcony of the back quarters, sweeping slowly, her eyes on the boys' windows. She had seen every nanny come and go. Each one was louder, stricter, more desperate than the last. None of them listened. None of them noticed. Amarachi had once been like them, proud and vocal, when she was fighting for her son's life in a hospital queue, begging nurses to give her just one more chance to pay. That son was gone now, and so was her anger. In its place was a quiet sadness that made her deeply, deeply patient. "Auntie Amarachi," the head housekeeper joked as she passed, "maybe you should give the nanny job a try." Amarachi smiled, but said nothing. She continued sweeping, her back bent low, her heart strangely aware that maybe, just maybe, her time had come. By the end of the week, the house was tense. Angela fumed every morning, demanding updates on new candidates. Darlington buried himself in board meetings. And the boys, left unchecked, skipped school twice and ordered pizza with the chef's phone. On Friday morning, the head housekeeper barged into Darlington's study. "Sir, there is no one left. The boys cannot remain unsupervised." Angela, adjusting her blouse, scoffed. "Just use the cleaner for now. What's her name again?" "Amarachi," the housekeeper said. Darlington waved it off. "Fine. Just keep them alive until Monday." Amarachi was summoned, not invited. Angela barely looked at her. "No stories, no drama. Just keep them from killing someone," she said coldly. Amarachi nodded once. She didn't ask for training. She didn't need to. Her own son, Chittybeer, had been more than a handful before the fever took him. Amarachi walked to the boys' lounge with no notebook, no rules, and no fear. Jason was the first to react. "They sent you," he said, lifting his head from a PlayStation. "You're the cleaner. You clean things, not people." Junior followed. "If you make us do homework, we'll make you cry." Amarachi smiled gently. "Then I guess I won't make you do homework today." The boys stared at her, confused. Amarachi walked over, turned off the console, and picked up a dirty sock. "I only have one rule," she said softly. "No disrespect under my roof." Jason blinked. "This isn't your roof." Amarachi looked around the mansion, then at him. "It is for now. So choose, silence or soap." Junior giggled. Jason narrowed his eyes. Something about her wasn't easy to break. When Amarachi left that evening, she didn't say goodbye. She just dropped a note on the fridge. "Dinner's in the warmer. If you're hungry, eat. If you're not, it's okay. Good night, Jason. Good night, Junior." That night, the boys stayed up late whispering. "Do you think she'll quit?" Junior asked. Jason frowned. "I don't know. She's weird." But for the first time, there was no mocking, no plot. Just confusion. Amarachi had treated them like boys, not problems. She hadn't tried to impress them or control them. She simply saw them. And somehow, that was more threatening than punishment. Across the mansion, Amarachi knelt by her mattress in the maid quarters, praying quietly. "Chittybeer, give me the strength to love them, even when they hate me." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But deep in her spirit, she knew these boys were not demons. They were hurting, just like she once was. The next morning began like every other in the Okizi mansion. Luxurious silence, broken by the echo of Junior's booming music from his Bluetooth speaker. Amarachi knocked on their door at 6:30 a.m. sharp. No answer. She knocked again, this time with more authority. "It's time to bathe," she said firmly. Jason opened the door, half asleep, and hissed, "We don't do alarms around here." Go iron your rags." Amarachi didn't flinch. She calmly walked into the room, pulled the curtains wide open, and turned off the music. Junior groaned, throwing his pillow. It missed. "Look, madam," Jason said, stepping in front of her. "We don't take orders from cleaners, nannies, or fake aunties. You want to earn points? Go beg Angela." Amarachi simply looked at him and said, "I'm not here to earn points. I'm here to raise humans." With that, she walked out. The boys exchanged glances. This woman was definitely not normal. Later that afternoon, they tried to break her. Junior stuffed wet tissue into her mop bucket, while Jason poured extra salt into the food she made for herself. Amarachi noticed. She took one bite, coughed lightly, and then calmly went back to the kitchen. She didn't scream or complain. She quietly made a new bowl of food and continued working. When Junior tripped her in the hallway, causing a tray of cups to crash to the floor, she knelt, picked them up one by one, and softly said, "You'll do worse when you're older, but you'll regret it more then." That sentence, too calmly delivered, lingered. For the first time in a long time, Junior didn't laugh. That evening, Amarachi told them a story about a boy who built a kite out of palm fronds and dreamt of flying with it. He believed anything was possible, she said. He just didn't know time could be stolen. Jason asked her what happened to the boy. Amarachi stared at the ceiling. He never got the chance. By bedtime, something had shifted. Amarachi had done what no nanny before her had. Survived day one without yelling, crying, or quitting. More than that, she'd done it without ever raising her voice. Jason lay in bed, arms behind his head, staring at the ceiling. "She's weird," he muttered. Junior replied, "She's not scared." The truth was, Amarachi had looked through them, not just at them. She saw the scars behind Jason's arrogance and the fear behind Junior's jokes. That night, when she prayed at their door again, she added their names out loud. "Bless Jason. Bless Junior. May their hearts find peace." The boys heard her, pretending to sleep. For the first time in years, neither of them reached for their phones. They just listened. And though they wouldn't say it aloud, something in her voice, soft, cracked, but steady, made them feel more seen than all the therapists and teachers combined. The following week was a test of patience for both Amarachi and the boys. They weren't done with their tricks. Jason poured water in her shoe before morning chores. Junior pretended to faint during breakfast, so she'd panic. When she didn't react, he opened one eye and said, "Aren't you supposed to scream?" Amarachi only tilted her head. When your heart hurts, your mouth should stay shut long enough to feel it. Junior blinked, unsure how to respond. She cooked their favorite yam porridge and served it without asking what they wanted. She washed their uniforms with care and left thoughtful notes tucked into their lunchboxes. One read, "You don't have to be loud to be loved." Another simply said, "The world is too harsh. Don't become it." Jason threw his note away the first time. But by the third day, he kept it. He didn't know why. In school, the boys were still seen as terrors. Jason skipped math class and sat on the rooftop reading a book of mice and men. Junior pushed a student during PE and refused to apologize. The principal called again. Darlington didn't answer. Angela didn't return the call. But Amarachi showed up at the school unannounced. When she walked into the office, the principal raised a brow. "Are you the new nanny?" he asked, unimpressed. Amarachi smiled. "I am the woman who cares when no one else shows up." She listened to the complaints, then requested to speak to the boys privately. In the empty library, she sat between them, held both their hands, and said, "You're not angry because people failed you. You're angry because you expected them to stay." Jason's hand trembled slightly. Junior avoided her eyes. "I can't make your father stay home," she continued. "I can't bring your mother back. But I can promise you, I'll stay even if you push." She didn't scold. She didn't bribe. She just held space for their pain. The next day, the teachers were surprised to see Jason raise his hand in class. He answered correctly, though with a sarcastic flair. Junior apologized for pushing the student and joined the art club. They didn't become angels overnight, but they started to shift. At home, Amarachi noticed. Their rooms were less messy. Jason started leaving his shoes at the door. Junior offered to set the table. Angela noticed too, and she didn't like it. She brought them expensive sneakers and forced hugs that made them stiffen. "You boys need a real mother," she said, her eyes flicking toward Amarachi. But when she left the room, Jason muttered, "Fake mummy." Junior snickered. Amarachi didn't react, but she heard it. And it worried her, not because she wanted their love, but because she feared what Angela might do when she realized she was losing control. The boys had been doing better. At least that's what Amarachi thought. But one Monday morning, while she was folding laundry, a call came through to the house. It was the school principal again, this time with a firm tone. Jason walked out of literature class after tearing up a group project. Junior refused to participate in PE and punched another student when asked why. Amarachi sighed. "I'll be there within the hour." When she arrived at the school, she wore her plain ochre wrapper and a white headscarf. Parents and staff glanced her way, some with curiosity, others with disapproval. A few students whispered, "Is that their maid?" Amarachi walked straight to the office, heart steady but heavy. She was greeted by the vice principal with the phrase she had come to dread, "You again." The boys sat on opposite ends of the waiting room, Jason fuming, Junior pouting. Neither of them looked at her when she entered. Amarachi didn't ask for an explanation. Instead, she sat between them on the narrow bench and placed a hand on each of their knees. "You want to be left alone, don't you?" she asked softly. "You want people to stop expecting you to be good, because being good never changed anything." Jason flinched. Junior stared at the floor. "But boys," she continued, "hurting others won't make the hurt inside you smaller. It'll only spread it." A long silence followed. Then Jason muttered, "She said I was broken." Amarachi frowned. "Who?" "Angela," he replied. "She told Junior I'd turn out useless, and that he should learn to fight early, because no one would protect him." Amarachi's jaw tightened. She squeezed their knees gently. "You are not broken. You are grieving. And you are loved, even when you don't act lovable." That was the first time they truly heard her, not just listened, but heard. Back home, Amarachi waited until Angela returned from her salon appointment. She politely asked for a private conversation. "I heard what you told the boys," she said calmly. Angela raised a brow, amused. "And what if I did? They need reality." Amarachi looked her in the eyes. "You don't teach reality by tearing down what little they have left." Angela scoffed. "Don't overstep, Maid." Amarachi didn't argue. She simply said, "Be careful. Even lies have ears." Angela stormed off. Later that evening, Amarachi found Jason sitting by the stairs, head down. She sat beside him. "You know," he said quietly, "you didn't have to come today." Amarachi smiled. "I didn't come because I had to. I came because you're worth showing up for." For the first time since his mother's funeral, Jason leaned his head on someone's shoulder and let it rest there. It was nearly midnight when Amarachi heard the soft sobbing. At first, she thought it was the breeze whining against the window panes, but the sound grew clearer, like muffled cries tangled in shame. She rose from her thin mattress, wrapped her old shawl around her shoulders, and walked slowly down the corridor leading to the boys' rooms. The mansion was silent, every other soul asleep or pretending to be. But as she approached Junior's door, she saw the faint sliver of light beneath it and heard the quiet rustling of sheets. She knocked softly, but there was no reply. When she opened the door, her heart sank. Junior sat on the edge of his bed, his face wet with tears and his bedsheet bunched in his fists. His pajamas were damp, the unmistakable shame of a 13-year-old boy who had wet the bed. He looked up, horrified, mouth trembling as he tried to speak. But Amarachi didn't wait. She entered slowly, knelt before him, and placed her hand on his knee. "I was just tired," Junior stammered. "I didn't mean to. But Amarachi hushed him gently, wiping the tears from his face with her wrapper. "You don't need to explain, my son. Your heart is heavy. Sometimes it spills out while we sleep." He looked away in embarrassment, but Amarachi reached for a fresh towel and began cleaning him up as if he were still 5 years old. She moved with grace, without disgust or judgment. When he tried to stop her, saying, "I'm too old for this," she smiled and replied, "My son would have been your age now. I always imagined I'd still do this for him on nights like this." The room grew still. Junior looked at her, confused. "You had a son?" Amarachi paused, then nodded. "Yes, Chitty Beer. He was kind. He laughed with his whole heart. But I lost him before I could afford the medicine that would have saved him." She didn't cry as she said it. Her voice was steady, her pain woven into the silence. Junior listened quietly, then asked, "Do you think he would have been like me?" Amarachi paused, touched his cheek gently, and whispered, "Yes. But that's why I'm here, so you can be better than both of us." She pulled a clean bed sheet over him, sat on the edge of the bed, and began humming a lullaby, soft Igbo, the kind a mother sings when her child can't sleep. Junior closed his eyes slowly, his body finally relaxing, as if someone had finally understood the storm inside him. Amarachi remained there, brushing his hair gently as he drifted off. And just before he fell asleep completely, he whispered, "Thank you, Mummy." Her hands froze for a moment, and then she smiled, tears finally rolling down her cheeks, not from pain this time, but because she knew the walls around his heart had begun to crumble. The next morning, Jason woke to an eerie calm in the house. Junior had eaten breakfast without arguing and even cleared his plate. Something had shifted. Jason didn't like it, or maybe he did, but wouldn't admit it. As he walked toward his room later that afternoon, he noticed Amarachi inside, quietly making his bed. She was humming the same lullaby he thought he'd heard last night in his sleep. But what caught his attention was what lay in her hand, a photograph of his mother. The photo was framed in gold, slightly chipped at the corners, and usually sat hidden behind his books. Amarachi didn't speak. She was just looking at it, not snooping, not judging, just remembering someone she never met. Jason stepped in, fists clenched. "Why are you touching that?" he demanded. Amarachi calmly set the frame back in its place and turned to him. "She was beautiful," she said softly, her eyes full of knowing. "She had your smile." Jason expected mockery, pity, maybe even fake compassion. But there was none. Just a woman standing in his room, seeing the one person everyone else had forgotten. His chest tightened. "People stopped talking about her," he said suddenly. "Even Dad. It's like she never existed." Amarachi walked slowly to his side. "Sometimes people forget because it's too painful to remember," she said. "But forgetting doesn't heal. It only hides the wound." Jason sank onto his bed, gripping the edge of his desk. "She was the only one who understood me. The only one who didn't try to change me." Amarachi sat beside him, quiet. "She still does," she whispered. "You carry her in how you love your brother, even when you pretend you don't." Jason turned to her, something cracking open inside him. "Do you think she'd be proud of me?" Amarachi reached for his hand. "Yes. Even when you mess up, even when you push people away, she'd still love you. Because that's what mothers do." They sat in silence for several minutes, the kind of silence that heals more than 1,000 words. Then Jason did something he hadn't done in years. He leaned against someone. Just slightly. Just enough. Amarachi didn't react or pull him closer. She simply allowed it. For the first time since the funeral, Jason let a tear fall, just one, and wiped it before anyone could see. But Amarachi saw it, and that was enough. That evening, as Amarachi walked to her quarters, she found a folded piece of paper slipped under her door. It was from Jason. Written in his messy handwriting were 4 simple words: "Thanks for remembering her." Angela returned to the mansion that weekend from a brief trip to Abuja, dragging 3 Louis Vuitton suitcases and an attitude. She strutted into the house with fresh lashes, a high ponytail, and a barely-there blouse that made the guards glance awkwardly away. Her heels clicked on the marble like a metronome of entitlement. "Where are my boys?" she called dramatically. "Mummy's home." But when she walked into the living room, she saw Jason and Junior sitting on the floor, laughing as Amarachi taught them how to fold pepper wraps with old newspapers. The scent of puff puff wafted from the kitchen. The TV was off. There was no chaos, just warmth. Angela froze. "What's going on here?" she asked, Her voice clipped. Jason looked up briefly and shrugged. We're cooking. Amarachi's showing us something. Angela's jaw tightened. Don't call her that. Call her what she is, the maid. Amarachi stood calmly and excused herself, giving a small nod to Angela. But Junior stood up and muttered, She's more mummy than you. Angela's eyes narrowed. What did you just say? Jason added with an amused smirk. We call her real mummy now. You're just the fake one. The words sliced deeper than any slap. Angela's face flushed with rage. She looked around, waiting for someone to defend her, but no one did, not even the chef. In a flash, she stormed toward Junior and grabbed his arm hard. I am your father's fiancé. You will respect me. Jason jumped to his feet, pushing her hand away. Don't touch him. Amarachi returned instantly and stood between them. Enough, she said firmly, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. This is a home, not a battlefield. If you can't behave like an adult, step outside. Angela seethed, humiliated that the boys had sided with the maid, and worse, that she had lost control. That night, Angela demanded Amarachi be removed. She confronted Darlington, spinning the story into lies. She's manipulating them, turning them against me, acting like their mother. Darlington listened, exhausted. Angela, they've changed since she came. They're calmer. They're doing better in school. What if she's exactly what they needed? Angela threw her glass across the room. I won't be disrespected by two brats and a glorified house girl, she screamed. Amarachi, who had been silently standing outside the office, turned and walked away. She wasn't hurt by the insult, not anymore. But she feared what Angela might do next. The boys had chosen her. And in Angela's world, that made Amarachi an enemy. What no one knew was that the storm had just begun. And Angela Okizi wasn't used to losing. But Amarachi? She had nothing left to lose, except the fragile bond she'd just begun to build. Dinner time at the Okizi mansion had always been an awkward affair. Polished cutlery, silent chewing, forced conversations, and Angela's occasional fake laughter that always sounded a little too high-pitched. Most nights, Chief Darlington ate in his study or arrived too late to bother. The boys would shove food around their plates or eat in silence, while Angela scrolled on her phone. But tonight was different. When Darlington walked into the dining room that evening, he paused at the door. He heard something unfamiliar, genuine laughter. Not mockery, not sarcasm, laughter. He stepped inside slowly and blinked in disbelief. Jason was helping Junior place small bowls of jollof rice on the table. Amarachi stood in the corner with a gentle smile, wearing her usual wrapper and apron. The air smelled of home-cooked food, and the room was filled with warmth, the kind that didn't come from chandeliers or imported marble tiles. For a moment, Darlington thought he had walked into the wrong house. Good evening, sir, Amarachi said, nodding respectfully. The boys turned and greeted their father, genuinely, without prompting or rolling their eyes. We cooked, Jason said, lifting the spoon proudly. Well, Amarachi taught us, but we helped. Junior grinned. I stirred the pot and didn't burn anything. Darlington, still dazed, took his seat at the head of the table. Angela, who had just joined them with freshly painted nails, gave a tight-lipped smile and sipped her wine. She was already seething. The boys had never done this for her. Not once. As they all sat, Amarachi quietly stepped back, prepared to eat alone in the kitchen as always. But Darlington looked up and said, Join us. She hesitated. Angela nearly choked on her drink. She's the maid, Darlington, Angela hissed. We don't. But Darlington cut her off with a look. She's family to them. And she made this meal. Amarachi sat cautiously, but the boys were already beaming. The dinner was filled with jokes, small stories, and even Darlington cracking a rare smile when Junior told him about his class presentation. Jason asked him questions about work, not to provoke, but to understand. It was the first time Darlington saw his sons as young men, not burdens or responsibilities. Angela sat through it all like a porcelain doll, smiling, but breaking internally. She tried to interrupt. She mentioned a trip to Paris she was planning, hoping to shift the focus. But no one asked her about it. They were too busy eating puff puff and debating who had peeled the most yams. When dessert came, small bowls of fruit salad, Amarachi leaned forward and said, "You boys did well today. Not just in cooking, but in trying." Jason looked at her and nodded, his voice soft. "Thanks, Mummy." Darlington's eyes widened slightly. Angela froze. Amarachi didn't reply. She just reached for her water and smiled, the kind of smile that meant more than anyone at that table was willing to say aloud. The house was still glowing from the aftertaste of that dinner, but Angela's rage was growing like a volcano beneath her calm exterior. For days, she tried everything to win the boys back, from expensive gifts to over-the-top motherly gestures. She bought them the newest phones, hired a personal trainer for them, even made their favorite smoothie. But neither Jason nor Junior paid her any real attention. Jason mumbled thank you and went back to his books. Junior accepted the gifts, but made sarcastic remarks like, "Fake Mummy's being nice again." What hurt Angela most wasn't their coldness, it was their joy when they were with Amarachi. She'd walk in and see them laughing over kitchen messes, or sitting in the garden talking about music. Amarachi was replacing her. A common maid was stealing her position in the home she intended to rule. And she couldn't take it anymore. One afternoon, Jason accidentally knocked over a cup of water near Angela's heels while setting the dining table. It splashed on her sandals, and she exploded. "Are you mad? Are you trying to embarrass me?" she screamed, slapping the cup out of his hand. Junior ran in from the hallway. It was an accident. Angela turned enraged and slapped him hard across the cheek. The sound echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. Junior staggered backward, stunned, his hand on his face. Jason shouted, "You hit him." "You psycho." Amarachi, who had been cleaning near the staircase, came running in. She pushed past Angela and pulled Junior into her arms. "Are you okay?" she whispered, holding his cheek gently. Angela stood there, breathing heavily, realizing too late that her outburst had gone too far. Amarachi turned to her with an icy calm. "This isn't love. This is control masked as care." What Angela didn't know was that one of the hallway cameras had captured everything. The scream, the slap, Junior's frightened face. Jason knew the system well and pulled the footage discreetly. That night, he copied it onto a flash drive. Meanwhile, Junior refused to speak to Angela. He wouldn't come out of his room unless Amarachi called him. Angela tried to apologize, offering snacks and hugs, but he pushed her away. "You're not my mother. You never were." When Amarachi tucked him into bed that night, Junior whispered, "If she stays here, I'll run away." Amarachi brushed his hair back and said, "No one will ever hurt you again, not while I'm here." Jason walked in and gave Amarachi the flash drive. "If she tries anything, we use this." Amarachi didn't want war. But for the first time, she felt the boys weren't just opening up to her. They were trusting her with their lives. The house was quieter in the days that followed, not out of peace, but tension. Angela had backed down momentarily, nursing her bruised ego and trying to salvage what little control she had left. Darlington had been away on a 3-day retreat with his board members, unaware of the slap incident. Amarachi, meanwhile, tried to keep the boys emotionally balanced. But one morning, as they all sat in the kitchen after breakfast, Junior suddenly asked, "Auntie Amarachi, you said you had a son before. What happened to him?" The question floated in the air like smoke. Jason looked up from his cereal. Amarachi froze, one hand on the sink. She turned slowly and nodded. "Yes, his name was Chitty Beer." She walked over and sat with them, her voice steady but soft, like someone peeling open an old wound that never fully closed. "He was a bright boy," she began. "Smarter than I ever was. He liked to draw on the walls with charcoal and pretend they were maps to hidden treasure." The boys smiled faintly. "But when he turned 9, he got sick. Malaria at first, then complications. I didn't have much. I worked as a cleaner in a government hospital. I begged them to admit him. They did, but only halfway. He needed a drug. It cost 15,000 Nigerian nairas." She paused. "I had 8,200 Nigerian nairas." Jason's brow furrowed. "What did you do?" Amarachi stared at the floor. "I begged. I cried. I even offered to clean the floors overnight. They refused. I called everyone I knew. No one picked. The nurse told me if I didn't pay, he wouldn't get it. Her voice broke for a moment. He died that night. In my arms. He kept apologizing, saying, "Mummy, I'll try to be strong tomorrow." But tomorrow never came. Silence fell. Junior wiped his eyes with his shirt sleeve. Jason looked away, jaw clenched. They let him die over 15,000 naira? Amarachi nodded slowly. That's why I work quietly. That's why I don't scream. Because I've screamed before, and it didn't save him. She looked at them, her eyes brimming but strong. You too remind me of him, not because you're perfect, but because you still have time. Junior hugged her tightly, burying his face in her chest. Jason placed his hand on her shoulder, his voice low. I'd give you 10 million if it would bring him back. Amarachi chuckled through her tears. Then don't waste it, Jason. Don't waste your chance at life. That day, something deeper than love settled between them, a quiet loyalty, a sacred bond not forged by blood, but by brokenness and healing. Amarachi wasn't just their maid anymore. She was the bridge between the boys they were and the men they were becoming. It was Monday morning when the first phone call came. Amarachi had just finished ironing Jason's shirt when her small phone buzzed on the windowsill. She picked it up to hear the school principal's voice, unusually calm but curious. "Good morning, madam. I just wanted to ask, is everything okay at home?" Amarachi's heart jumped slightly. She asked if something was wrong. No, not wrong, the principal clarified. Just different. Jason scored 92% on his English literature test, and Junior participated in morning assembly voluntarily. He even read a poem aloud. This is unlike them, not that I'm complaining. Amarachi smiled softly, the iron still steaming beside her. Maybe they're just remembering who they really are, she said. After she ended the call, she sat quietly for a while, her mind drifting. The boys weren't just behaving better. They were healing, and the world around them was beginning to notice. Later that day, the vice principal emailed Chief Darlington directly, the first such contact in months. In the message, he praised the boys' improvement in both behavior and academics, describing Jason as focused and cooperative, and Junior as creative and articulate. Darlington read the message while boarding his return flight to Lagos. For a long moment, he simply stared at the words, unsure what to make of them. For so long, he had been emotionally absent, focused on expanding his empire and drowning in business meetings. In truth, he had avoided the boys not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know how to face the reminders of their mother. Her smile in Junior's dimples, her stubborn streak in Jason's sarcasm. He'd chosen silence as a survival mechanism. But now that silence was being broken not by therapy nor money, but by a maid who never even applied to be their nanny. When he got home that evening, Darlington entered the house quietly. He heard faint laughter from the boys' room and followed it, stopping at the doorway. Amarachi was sitting cross-legged on the rug with Junior, while Jason sat on the edge of the bed, correcting his own grammar homework. They were laughing over a joke in the textbook, something about tenses being more confused than Nigerian traffic. Amarachi was explaining it in her usual gentle tone, using a song to help them remember. Darlington stood there for a while unnoticed, watching his sons interact with a woman they now called Mummy in private. A woman who hadn't been hired for this role, but had claimed it through love. Quietly, he backed away, his chest tightening. For the first time in years, he felt both grateful and ashamed. Grateful that someone had stepped up, and ashamed that it hadn't been him. Angela knew she was losing, and she wasn't the type of woman to go down quietly. In her mind, the mansion was hers. The lifestyle, the power, the influence, all hers by proximity. She had suffered through Darlington's long hours, pretended to adore the boys when cameras were on, and endured the bland conversations of Lagos socialites. She had paid her dues. Yet now, her future was being threatened by a woman who mopped floors and wore threadbare wrappers. A maid who had somehow wormed her way into the hearts of the very boys Angela needed to control. One evening, while Amarachi was helping Junior with his science notes in the library, Angela barged in, barely able to contain her fury. "You think this house is yours?" she hissed. Amarachi looked up calmly, not even startled. "No, I think it belongs to the boys. I just treat it like a home." Angela slammed her purse on the table. "You're trying to replace me. You've seduced them. And now you want their father too." Amarachi stood slowly, her face calm but firm. "I didn't seduce anyone. I simply showed up every day when no one else did." Angela's eyes narrowed. "You're getting fired. I'll make sure of it." She stormed out, stomping down the hallway to Darlington's study. "She's manipulating your sons," she said, pacing like a caged cat. "She's turning them against me, and now they're calling her mummy. This is emotional sabotage." Darlington listened quietly, his expression unreadable. Angela kept ranting, painting Amarachi as a cunning woman climbing the social ladder through emotional blackmail. When she finished, she stood with folded arms, expecting an instant dismissal. But Darlington leaned back in his chair and said, "Angela, they've never smiled like this before. Never listened. Never laughed. And Amarachi did that, not you, not me. So be very careful what you accuse her of." Angela's mouth fell open, stunned. "Are you taking her side?" Darlington didn't answer. But he didn't need to. That night, Angela confronted Amarachi again. "Pack your things. I give you till morning," she said through clenched teeth. "You can't fire me," Amarachi replied softly. "Only the man of this house can." Angela grabbed her by the arm, but before things escalated further, Jason appeared from the hallway. He was holding a flash drive. "Try anything again, and I'll send the video to every lawyer in Lagos," he said coldly. Angela froze. She'd forgotten about the CCTV. Amarachi gently removed her arm and walked away, not needing to threaten, not needing to win. She already had. Angela stormed into her room, shaking with rage. She'd lost the boys, lost the narrative, and now she feared she might lose the man. But she still had one card left, an ultimatum, and she would play it soon. Morning came, and with it came the storm. Angela descended the staircase with her suitcase, makeup immaculate, lips pressed in a tight line. Darlington sat in the lounge, sipping coffee, waiting. "I'm leaving," she said, her voice theatrical. "Unless you fire that woman today." Darlington didn't look up. "Then you're leaving." Angela's jaw tightened. "You're choosing her over me?" He finally met her gaze. "I'm choosing my sons." The words were final. Angela turned on her heels and headed toward the front door, dragging her luggage behind her. She passed Amarachi in the hallway without a word. Amarachi nodded respectfully but said nothing. As Angela neared the door, she turned once more. "You'll regret this, Darlington, when she turns them against you too." But he remained silent, watching the door close behind her. The house grew quiet again, not like before, when it echoed with tension, but with relief. That afternoon, Amarachi sat in the garden, weeding the small flower bed she had begun nurturing weeks ago. She didn't know what her fate would be now that Angela was gone. She wasn't family. She had no formal contract. She only had the trust of two boys and a heart stitched together with memory and faith. She didn't hear them coming, Jason and Junior. But she felt them. Jason knelt beside her with a folded note. Junior dropped something in her lap, a photo frame. Amarachi picked it up. It was a family portrait, the three of them drawn in pencil, standing in front of the house. Jason had scribbled under it, "Our real family." Amarachi's eyes filled. "We want you to stay," Jason said. "Even if Daddy changes his mind. We'll fight." Junior added, "You're our mummy now." Amarachi tried to speak, but emotion choked her voice. She hugged them tightly, whispering, "You saved me too." Later that evening, Darlington called Amarachi into the main study. She walked in nervously, unsure of what he would say. But he simply gestured to the chair across from him. "They stood by you," he said. "I've never seen them fight for anyone." Amarachi nodded slowly. "They've been fighting alone for too long. I only reminded them they didn't have to." He studied her for a long moment. "You didn't just change them. You reminded me how to be a father again." Amarachi looked down, overwhelmed. I didn't plan to. I just didn't want to fail them. Darlington leaned forward. Then don't leave. Stay. Not just as help, but as family. It wasn't a proposal. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something neither of them had dared to hope for. And outside the door, Jason and Junior stood quietly, holding their breath. Because, for the first time, love had stopped being a word and started becoming a home. Angela didn't leave quietly. Her departure was loud, dramatic, and laced with a bitterness that clung to every hallway she passed through. After Darlington chose Amarachi over her, she refused to pack her things silently like a wounded woman. Instead, she strutted around the mansion like a rejected queen, issuing thinly veiled insults at the staff, blaming Amarachi for ruining a perfect family, and hurling threats no one took seriously. She lingered in front of a large portrait in the main corridor, the one taken at Darlington's last business gala, where she stood beside him in a red dress with fake smiles all around. She stared at it as if trying to freeze time. "You'll come crawling back," she muttered under her breath before slamming the main door behind her, her designer heels clicking like a final insult. No one came to say goodbye. The driver, long tired of her tantrums, didn't even help with her luggage. Outside, the world she wanted, filled with fame, control, and wealth, was still waiting, but now she had to face it alone. Back inside the mansion, the air felt fresher. Amarachi, cautious and humble, remained in her place. She didn't take Angela's departure as a victory. She knew all too well that when pride falls, it often returns with vengeance. But the boys were freer, lighter, and happier than she'd ever seen. Jason now spent evenings writing poems in his notebook, often showing them to Amarachi and pretending he didn't care about her feedback, though her praise made him beam in silence. Junior asked her to help him build a mini herb garden in the backyard, proudly announcing that he'd grow real onions and garlic, so we won't have to buy fake market ones. For once, the mansion wasn't just a mansion. It was becoming a home. Amarachi cooked their meals with intention. They all ate together, not by obligation, but by rhythm, laughter filling spaces where silence once brooded. It was a slow, healing melody. Darlington watched all this with growing clarity. For years, he'd been a bystander in his own home, a father in name, a partner in contract, a man hiding behind business deals and luxury suits. Angela had always known the right things to say, but never the right way to listen. Amarachi said little, but every word hit the soul. She never asked for anything, never demanded to be seen. And yet, he couldn't stop seeing her. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, Darlington stood alone in the garden, staring up at the stars. He remembered the day his wife died, how the light left his son's eyes, and how he never truly knew how to bring it back. Until now. He looked toward the upstairs window, where Amarachi's lamp still glowed dimly. Something stirred inside him. It wasn't just admiration. It was gratitude turning into something deeper, something dangerous, something sacred. The following weekend, the boys planned something special. It was Amarachi's birthday, though she had tried to keep a secret. She didn't expect gifts or cakes. In her world, birthdays were simply days to pray, survive, and keep breathing. But Jason and Junior had been secretly preparing for weeks. They gathered old art supplies, printed pictures, and even borrowed the driver's help to sneak in a small cake from her favorite roadside bakery. Early that Saturday morning, before she rose to sweep or light the gas cooker, the boys barged into her room with laughter, candles, and a poorly sung version of Happy Birthday. Amarachi sat up, blinking in disbelief. What is all this?" she asked, overwhelmed. Jason held up a handmade card, and Junior bounced excitedly. "Open it, Mummy." Inside the card was a drawing of their little family, the two boys on either side of Amarachi, with Darlington standing slightly behind, smiling. Amarachi pressed the card to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't been called Mummy in years, not since her own child had passed. The pain never truly left, but this moment, this pure act of love, softened the scar in a way she hadn't thought possible. Jason reached into his pocket and handed her a small wooden bracelet he had carved himself. It's not fancy, he said, eyes darting away, but I made it myself. It's got your name on the inside. Amarachi turned the bracelet around, her fingers trembling. It read, Amarachi, the mother who stayed. She could barely speak. She pulled both boys into her arms and held them close, whispering, thank you for letting me love you. Junior replied with innocence and conviction, you didn't just love us. You saved us. That morning, for the first time in years, Amarachi laughed, freely, loudly, like a woman who had finally come home. Darlington joined them later at the garden, holding a small gift of his own, a silver necklace, with a simple pendant shaped like a dove. You deserve more, he said softly, but this is a start. Amarachi tried to protest, but he silenced her gently. You've given us peace, Amarachi. That's worth more than diamonds. They shared a quiet moment, interrupted only by the boys playfully tossing cake crumbs at each other. Later that afternoon, they had lunch outside, just the four of them, like a real family. The chef stayed away. The staff tiptoed quietly. Something had shifted permanently. Amarachi was no longer the help. She was the heartbeat of the home. And though no one said the words out loud, the unspoken truth settled in everyone's chest. This was what love looked like. Not perfection, not pretense, just presence. It was 3 days after the birthday when Darlington asked Amarachi to join him for dinner, just the two of them. The invitation came casually, almost nervously. The boys are at a school campout, he said. It'll just be us tonight. I thought maybe we could talk. Amarachi hesitated. She wasn't used to being invited to sit where decisions were made. But something in his voice, soft, respectful, made her nod. That evening, she changed into a modest lace gown she had kept folded away for years. It wasn't new, but it was clean. She tied her hair back and stepped into the dining room like a guest, not a servant. Darlington stood when she entered. You look, he paused, unable to finish. Amarachi smiled gently and took her seat. The dinner was simple, grilled fish, plantain, and a bottle of palm wine. But the atmosphere felt weighted with emotion neither of them had yet named. They ate in silence at first, broken only by the occasional clink of cutlery. Then Darlington cleared his throat. Do you ever think about what life would have looked like if your son was still here? Amarachi's eyes shimmered, but she nodded. Every day, she replied. But I also think maybe I wouldn't have met Jason and Junior. Maybe I wouldn't have had the strength to love them the way I do. Darlington leaned in slightly. And me, he asked. Would you still have looked at me the way you do now? Amarachi didn't answer right away. She sipped her drink, then met his eyes. I look at you as a man who rediscovered fatherhood. That's enough for now. Her words struck him deeply. For the first time in a long time, Darlington wasn't being admired for his wealth or status, but for the man he was trying to become. It humbled him. Before the night ended, Darlington walked her to the garden. The moon was high, casting silver light over the roses. He turned to her and said, I don't want to rush anything. I don't want to complicate what we have. But Amarachi, you've changed this house. You've changed me. She looked away, unsure how to respond. You don't need to say anything now, he added. I just needed you to know. Amarachi smiled, heart pounding. Then know this too, you didn't fail your sons. You just forgot how to find your way back to them. And now you're here. They stood for a while, not touching, not speaking, just being. And in the quiet, beneath the moonlight, and within the safety of their presence, something beautiful bloomed. The beginning of something neither of them dared name, but both knew was real. The sun had barely risen when Amarachi found the folded paper envelope on her bedside table. At first, she thought it was just another school update or reminder from the boys. But when she opened it, her hands trembled. Inside was a hand-drawn portrait of 4 people. Jason, Junior, Amarachi, and Darlington, all smiling, arms around each other in front of the mansion. Beneath it was written in Jason's bold handwriting, Our real family. Tucked behind the drawing was a formal printed invitation, issued by the boys, inviting her to a small family breakfast celebration in the garden. Jason added a note, wear something nice. No aprons today. Love, your sons. Amarachi pressed the paper to her chest, overwhelmed with emotion. She had mopped these floors, scrubbed these toilets, and eaten behind the kitchen door. But today, she was being invited, not as staff, but as the heart of the home. She stepped into the garden and froze. A small table had been set under the mango tree, adorned with a white cloth, 2 vases filled with hibiscus flowers, and 3 plates of pancakes made with reckless amounts of syrup. Jason wore a button-down shirt, and Junior had even tried to tie a bow tie backwards. Darlington stood beside them, holding a small velvet box. Amarachi approached slowly, tears already threatening to fall. "You boys planned all this?" she whispered. "We did," Junior beamed. "Daddy helped too, but the idea was ours." Darlington stepped forward, voice low but steady. "I wanted to say this in front of them, because they deserve to see what love looks like. Amarachi, I've watched you restore what I thought I'd lost forever. You didn't just raise my sons. You reminded me how to be a father. You gave us back our home." He opened the box, not a ring, but a gold necklace with a simple pendant shaped like an anchor. "If you say yes to being ours, we will never drift again." Amarachi fell to her knees, overwhelmed, covering her face with her palms. Jason and Junior rushed forward, hugging her tightly. "Say yes, Mummy," Jason whispered. "We already love you like our mom. We just want to make it official." Amarachi, crying openly now, nodded through her tears. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes to all of it. To the family. To the healing. To this second chance." Darlington knelt beside her, and together, the 4 of them embraced beneath the mango tree as the sun bathed them in light. For the first time in years, there were no walls between them. Just truth. Just healing. Just love. The staff peeked from the corridor windows, some silently weeping. The woman they once called the quiet maid had become the cornerstone of the house. Not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. With patience. With presence. With love. The wedding wasn't grand. It wasn't held in a cathedral filled with gold or attended by the elite of Lagos. Instead, it was quiet, simple, and sacred. A private ceremony held in the garden where everything had started, with just a few close friends, staff who had become family, and 2 teenage boys standing proudly beside their father. Amarachi wore a soft ivory gown, modest, graceful, and stitched by hand by one of the staff tailors who insisted on gifting it to her. Jason walked her down the small aisle, his head held high, his eyes wet with emotion. Junior held the bouquet and whispered excitedly, "You're really our mummy now." When the officiant asked Amarachi if she would love and protect not just Darlington, but his children as her own, she replied without hesitation, "I already do." The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was deeply felt. The woman who entered the mansion to clean its floors had now become the soul of its future. After the ceremony, they danced under the moonlight, with Jason DJing from a small Bluetooth speaker and Junior attempting to lead Amarachi through an awkward waltz that turned into laughter. Darlington watched his wife, smile at his sons with a tenderness he hadn't known he was missing. Later that night, he pulled her aside and held her hands. "You've given us more than a home," he said. "You gave us hope, and we'll spend every day trying to give that back to you." Amarachi rested her forehead against his and whispered, "I don't need the world, Darlington. Just this. Just you and our boys and peace." He kissed her gently, not as a billionaire sealing a deal, but as a man finally coming home. There were no paparazzi, no press releases. Just joy. Just healing. Just a quiet miracle of love finding its way into the most unexpected places. And in the weeks that followed, the transformation became even more visible. Jason, once a rebellious shadow, now mentored younger boys at school and submitted his first poem to a national writing competition. Junior's laughter filled every hallway, his confidence growing by the day. The mansion, once cold and echoing with tension, now buzzed with warmth. Amarachi didn't stop working. She still swept, still folded laundry, but now she did it as a queen in her own right, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Love had not changed her nature. It had simply given her the recognition she never sought, but had always deserved. And when people asked Darlington what changed his sons, he always smiled and answered, A woman who wasn't hired but stayed. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for more.